Welcome everyone to this episode of the Forensic Focus podcast. As always, you've got Si and Desi as your co-host, and this week we're joined by Brett Shavers, who, as we were just saying offline, we're both some fanboys of Brett's, and there's a lot of people that were very excited we were interviewing him. He is the author of DFIR Investigative Mindset, which is a excellent book if you haven't got your hands on it, and it's not too much of a read. So I think, what is it? It's only 200 or so pages. Yeah, about 222 pages. And I'm still getting my way through it, but it's a great read. Welcome, Brett, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And you know, we say that you're the author of that, which you are, obviously, but also the fairly definitive putting the suspect behind the keyboard. And also, and this is, you know, one of my favourite and often referenced books is the X-Rays Forensics Guide. You know, it's pretty much the official manual for a tool which is used in a significant number of you know, organisations across the world. So, you know, it really is a pleasure to have you on and to be able to talk to you about, you know, the work that you've done. I mean. I was saying you were old earlier, and I didn't mean it in any way. And I'm so sorry for phrasing it that way. But I mean, we've been in the industry for a while, and I've been familiar with your books for a while. But how did you get into this? How did we start off? Why are you a forensics guru to the rest of us?
I'm just barely keeping my head above water like everybody else with the technology. So, well, I did undercover work for about a decade, I guess, in the U.S. Law enforcement. We're buying drugs and guns, and I bought some humans. I was a hitman, you know, and a couple times, and a bunch of different things for that. And toward the,
I'm going to ask, you know, just on the basis of this, you were buying these people in real life. This wasn't a digital. I'm logging into the black market and buying some drugs. This is like, you know, meeting some shady guy in the back of a bar somewhere and asking him.
A bar, a nice people. Boat, anywhere, parking lot. I bought pretty much anything that's been illegal, I guess you can think of, and sold probably just the same as well, you know. But where there's an arrest, not just letting drugs on the street or selling people, but a lot of those operations and a lot of the criminal organizations that I did were international or transnational, I guess you look at it that way. So I had a lot of different crime groups, outlaw motorcycle gangs, some Asian crime groups, and that sort of thing. And about the last part of that decade, one of my co-case agents was a federal agent, and he was gone for a few months, and I'm working the case by myself. He comes back, and I said, "Where have you been?" And he said, "All I can tell you is I'm marketable." And I go, "What does that mean?" And he had gone to FLETC, which is the you know, the computer forensics, you know, the federal training. And he told me all about it, and I said, "Yeah, that's probably a lot better than the job that I'm currently doing, because there's a lot of close calls, and you had guns pointed at my gut and that sort of thing." And so then I started to work my way into that field. That my agency didn't have any forensic unit, didn't care about it. Budget's always a problem, so I begged, borrowed, and stole. I took a lot of free training, practiced a lot. I imaged all the computers in my department as much as I could find for practice, and eventually did some cases and learned that it's a lot harder than I expected it to be, and a lot more important than I thought it would be. And it kind of got me in the direction that I'm now. So that's kind of the short story of, I didn't want to be killed, you know, on the street selling things or buying things, but computers, you know, never know, they'll probably kill us one day too. But that's where I'm at.
It seems like a sensible way of preserving one's existence, I have to admit. Did you have a technical background at all before you came to it, or was it purely through that training?
I mean, I took a basic class in high school, so that's how old I am when we had basic in high school, and that was the extent of it. I joined the Marines at 17, and my wife says I just walked around the woods a lot, so no technical background in the military. So I came, you know, like I said, in law enforcement after seeing what forensics could do. That's where I got into it.
And talking about how it's hard and kind of like you spend a lot of time imaging and getting good at it. We saw your recent blog post, the "You Don't Belong in DFIR," and was reading through that last night as well. What kind, like, because I agree with it. Like, I think I like the image that you have on it, DFIR being the tip of the spear in cybersecurity. And when you do think about it in the context of it being used for law enforcement, because I think contextually it's bastardized a little bit and used just in general in cybersecurity. But what was the motivation behind writing this blog? Like, was there something that had come up? But it sounds like it's kind of like a long time belief
I
as
think
well.
a culmination of what you see online, people complaining about. I mean, it is difficult to get into the field, and
Yeah,
I think DFIR, I always put a slash between both because it is a separation, but it has some Venn diagram in there as well. And I think IR is just as probably tougher for me. I've done IR work. I don't like it. That's why I stick to the other side.
yeah,
But I know it's just as important because you have businesses and you have people and families who rely on income from having jobs and businesses. And
yeah,
so that's very important. And it is kind of the tip of the spear in that realm. But you have different types of pressures. You have people breathing down your neck, like literally on your neck, telling you to hurry up.
yeah,
And I think it's even harder because you're trying to predict human behavior. Like, what is this person trying to do, or what's happening right now, and how do I prevent it? And am I going to miss something? Whereas the forensic side, you're looking retrospective, historical, right? It's well, the world's not ending. It's and I have this dead image on my desk, so you have more time to be more methodical. So there's different pressures on both.
yeah,
So for the tip of the spear, that's I really put both in there, and I know I wrote the article where it's more like the the law enforcement side, but it really does lead over to both. And with the because I get questions, emails, how do I get in? How come I'm having such a hard time getting into a DFIR? And I kind of come to the conclusion that it's really not an entry level job. It's not something. It's like Indy 500. You can't expect to take a 40-hour how to drive class and then you're racing at hundreds of miles an hour. I mean, when you get into that car, you have to be able to drive hundreds of miles an hour from that first second, or you're going to die.
yeah.
So the point of it is you have to build up your experience and your skills, and move into it. But that's my opinion. It can always be sometimes there's luck. People can get in, obviously, networking and.
Yeah. It's funny, like, while I was reading this post last night, I was actually talking to a couple of people on LinkedIn that just randomly connect and always are, they're like, oh, how do you get into IR? Because my background's IR. So how do you get into IR? How do you get into cybersecurity? And I think there's a cohort coming through now, and this is quite a good blog to get them to read as well, but it's not an entry-level job, but they think that going and doing a master's or a bachelor's at university will get them into, because it's formal education, but then when I'm like, okay, but you want to get into a technical field, so what have you done technically to hone your skills and get in your foot in the door? And they're like, oh no, like I don't like doing any of that stuff, but I want to be an IR person. I'm like, but it's all technical at the entry level. So like, you've done this theoretical bachelor's, which is great. I think getting a bachelor's is a good thing, but it's not going to get you into IR. And I think that's the gap in some of the messaging, because I think universities are selling that. They're like, hey, you do our bachelor's, we have a 90% job success rate for our students, but they're probably not saying that the people getting jobs might be getting jobs at fast food joints still when they're coming out. Like, it's not in
the employment
IR.
ratio is not necessarily directly related to your degree. I'm going to say I was going to comment similarly, and Desi sits on one side of this beautiful field in the IR space, and I sit very firmly like you. I don't need the stress of someone breathing down in my neck. I don't need the. I do it. I've done it occasionally, but it's like, oh, this is really critical now, or our shareholders are going to kill us. And it's like, well, yeah, that's great. I'll go back to my nice criminal case over here. Does not go to court for another 3 months. That's brilliant. But I mean, I came to this. I was a systems administrator first. I spent literally decades as a security specialist, and then got into forensics. And I do some defence work now. I do quite a lot of defence work now. but you're reading the reports and you're like, you just genuinely have no idea how a computer actually works, do you? You've sat the FTK course, you've done perhaps a couple of bits of additional learning, and then you've made a statement which fundamentally undermines the basis of computing here. You know, it's like you've not read any of Turing's papers, you've not understood the computability of numbers or any of this stuff, and therefore I'm going to take you apart because you don't know your stuff. So it definitely is that, and I think the vendors have done us a dirty by, and X-Ways is the one that hasn't. But a lot of the other ones have done us a dirty by going, here, click this button, you get evidence.
Yeah. I think tools are great, and compared from way back when we were doing command line everything, or Norton Disk Header, it is nicer to have push buttons, and I think it's necessary. But like you said, we have to know the underlying, what is it actually doing, and where is this data, how did it get generated? Where does it live? Where do I find it? And like you said, I've come out of a trial before, and the opposing expert came up to me and asked me, where did I find these messages on this phone? And in my mind, I'm thinking, you didn't find them? It's
that's a scary thought,
well,
though,
it is,
isn't it?
and it made me think at the same time, what else did I miss? Because if they missed it, then I probably missed something too. So there is that level of we have to know what we don't know out there as well.
Mm.
It's funny because we we complain. I complain. I think we complain as an industry that the discs are getting bigger, and it's like, well, there's no way I'm ever going to look all the way through a 5 terabyte disk, and I've got cases with 5-10 terabytes worth of data, and I mean it's unworkable. But it's not like I ever sat and looked through a 1.44 meg floppy end to end either. It is a little bit illusionary that that this is that data has ever been particularly manageable. So yeah, tools are and the search and the question of what is it that we've missed is always a thing.
Or misinterpreted.
But the question, or misinterpreted, yeah. I have a great fun exercise with so when I teach and you teach students and you give them this piece of material to examine and they go, oh, it must have been created this way. And you're like, well, no, because I know how I created it and it wasn't that way. So
yeah.
So yeah. But you've written the Definitive X-Ways book. How did you get into this relationship with X-Ways?
Let me see. I don't get too much detail on. When I was trying to get into forensics and law enforcement, I was working undercover, and I was assigned to a federal task force, and I would sneak off to training. And I wouldn't tell my agency, but my federal task force would send me. So I'm working cases on the East Coast when I'm, living on the West Coast. I'm doing everything remotely, buying and selling things. I'm having people do arrests for me. And I'm looking at software, trying to find software, and one of the ones was X-Ways Forensics. And my partner and I were, we said, well, this is before there was any training. I think X-Rays version, I can't remember what version it was. The first version of X-Rays Forensics had come out. And, we had emailed Stefan and asked, is there any training? And he said no. So we said, would you like to come to Seattle? We'll pay you to come to Seattle. And so he came to Seattle and he gave a class on X-Rays. And it was a 40-hour class, his first class. And there was like no breaks at all. We had like a 30-minute lunch. It was something crazy. And so it was really intense. And watching what X-Rays could do at that time, I mean, compared now, it's just a drastic difference. But at that time, it's like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And then I go to another forensic training on the East Coast at Flat Sea, where we get NCASE, FTK, a bunch of other tools, and we get a test image. And we're all working on the same image, but we can use whatever tool that we want to use. I want to use X-Ways because I just took the training. I think I like it, right? I got a guy next to me using NCASE, another guy using FTK. That was a version, I think, 4 NCASE at the time, maybe 5. And we're doing data carving. And on my image, I'm coming with a lot of pornography, adult pornography, not child. And one of the IRS agents teaching the class walks behind me, and she accuses me of surfing the internet, right? Porn on the internet. So I'm saying, well, the computer doesn't have internet access, number one. And I said, this is from your image. And NCASE and FEK couldn't find it. They all of us were trying to carve for it. And I'm going, wow, this is kind of neat. So it turns out that image was created by one of the instructors. his personal computer, and X-Ways actually carved out, a lot of pictures. So, they grabbed all our images and canceled that test for that day. Now I'm sure FTK and NCASE does a great job of the same level of data covering, but at that time, X-Ways was the only one, and we did the whole classroom test for that, and it was I was like, oh, I'm impressed. I like X-Ways. And talking to Stefan here and there, I mentioned the manual, and I said the manual's not that easy to read. I guess it's trying to find how do I use it. And his opinion, which I don't disagree with, is you should already know how to use it. So the manual is not going to teach you how to use it. So that's where the book came. It's like, well, I need to take a lot of notes here. And I took a lot of notes, and I eventually said, well, it probably needs to be a book. So that's my X-Ways introduction.
And what version are you on now? It's on
20.
I certainly own at least 2 myself. 20.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
21, but it keeps getting these releases every other week. It seems like it's a.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, the updates keep coming in. That's very fair. That's impressive. I mean, you are a prolific writer, both in terms of posts that I've seen on LinkedIn and in terms of books. I mean, how much time do you actually devote to? I'm going to say putting pen to paper, but the metaphorical thing I'm trying to get at here.
I should do more, but not that much daily. I mean, it's usually just an intense moment of, okay, let me sit down and get this one done. Let me sit down and get this chapter done in a couple of days, or let me write a post, tonight. So it's more intense work than instead of, I guess more consistent is better, but I'm consistent at intense work, rather than every day.
And saying that, am I not mistaken that you've got another book coming out this year?
Yeah. That's it should be a really good book. It's different than I think any other forensic book that's been written.
So it's investigative strategies. I'm seeing, judging by the title on the on your post. I came to this from a very technical background. It's interesting the way the field is split between law enforcement. Sorry, Desi, we're going to go off on a little tangent here into forensics. But it's an interesting split between the law enforcement guys who have come from that detective investigative mindset versus those of us who come at it from a very technical perspective. And I think we're both trying to learn each other's fields. How do I phrase this question would be a good start. What's your opinion about the necessity of an investigative mindset? I mean, you've written a book on it, so I'm going to guess this is fairly important to you.
I think it's most important. And I think, Jesse, one of your shorts came up on my feed one time. You were talking about infinite pivoting or something, and you said something about thinking like if I was a lazy hacker, how would I get in? I think that's, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And I thought that's exactly one of the ways of thinking is, and law enforcement does that all the time. It's if you look at it like a burglary of a house, they say, well, how did this person get in? Well, let me check the windows. Let me check the door. Let me check this. Let me check. So you're wondering how they got in. And if it's lazy, well, maybe the back door's open, right? So it's the same kind of thinking not to be a criminal, but to think like a criminal or the adversary. That's one way to think about it. And I think that's very important because you can be technically expertise in everything. You can read a SQLite database and know everything, but if you can't understand human behavior of why somebody did something, or the motive, you're going to miss some things of how you're going to miss some things of the case, and criminal investigations obviously is even more important because you really have to prove somebody did it. Technically, you can say, well, this happened on this machine, right? It happened. Well, in the IR world, that's fine because we shut it down, we contained it, the business is running, we're good to go. But on the other side, the forensic side, and the law enforcement, even civil litigation, it's like, well, we know what happened, but who did it? Because that's what the whole thing is about. Is someone, there's got to be justice. Either someone stole some IP, or there should be some justice. Someone assaulted somebody, there should be some justice. So it's important in both aspects, but it's really important on the forensic side. But I really believe it helps the IR side because if you can start to understand how breaches are happening, you can see, well, this definitely seems to be like an insider attack because whatever indicators, or this one seems to be coming from someplace else, and you can handle it. Your path is going to be different when you're looking at the work because you have an idea of where it's going by the evidence, not by just guessing. But it's like, well, this is what I think. Let me check. Yep, there's some clues.
Yeah.
I think I might be on the right track.
Yeah. And we were saying just before this as well, like, because now that I'm in insider risk and insider threat, like, the difference between someone external, like from an IR perspective, and then an insider is very subtle in a lot of the evidence. But then there are certain behaviors. So if you've got a baseline of that user, things like their browsing habits, like if their browsing habits on the internet don't change, it's more likely to be an insider than someone else, because it's then matching the persona on the keyboard versus the person. And is the person really going to know that this guy is really into like the Yankees and searching them on the internet all the time, day by day, while they're doing their job? Like, probably not. So yeah, like little subtle things like that. Because I guess some of the stuff that I do now does eventually go to court, because companies will take individuals to court for litigation.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's a fascinating one that I came up with because, like I said, I worked in security for a long time, and I remember specifying against government set standards, but specifying the logging and monitoring that needed to go onto a system. And I get there now, and I'm looking at it, I'm going, oh my god, that's not nearly enough to actually point to an individual. And I'm coming up against it. I've got an ongoing case where. Yes, the guy's user ID has been used to access something, but because of all of the failure of pretty much every other single control in the rest of this space, there's not actually a way to pin it on him, which is it's a nightmare in terms of security. It's a nightmare in terms of forensics. It's just absolutely appalling. And yeah, actually that aspect of putting a suspect behind a keyboard, he says plugging a book quite conveniently, is absolutely critical. And this is where your book has been fantastic, and it continues to be is because of that investigative mindset, that fantastic sort of set of suggestions and ideas and ways of approaching that that you've obviously worked on over a long period of time from real world experience. So what would you sort of characterize as the main sort of ways of actually approaching that?
It's these are hard questions because and I got some answers, but just as a kind of a background on this mindset, in 2008 ish or so, I was given a workshop to was it DFIR SW? I think it was whatever it was a PhD classroom of.
Oh yeah.
DFRWS.
And this is that's one, right?
The one. Yeah.
So way back then, and it's a room full of PhDs, and I have just a few years on of doing forensics, full time. And one of the professors in the front row, she asked me a question. She said, "Sounds like you're saying everyone needs to have investigative experience as law enforcement." And I said no, and they all basically said, "Well, it sounds like it." And I go, "Well, I don't think you have to. I think you just have to have, the thinking, the mindset to do it." And she said, "Well, how do we teach that if we've never done it?" And I said, "I don't know." So I didn't know, right? Honestly, and for years, and I wrote it in that first book that I wrote. I think I wrote a few pages of you have to have the investigative mindset, but I didn't flesh it out really enough. But over the years, trying to find and research, well, how do you teach this? Because I was teaching at different universities, and I'm thinking, well, how do you teach this? Other than in law enforcement, you go out in a police car, you have a case, a crime, a 911 call, whatever it is, you become a detective. You got to figure it out, right? And you learn through trial and error, and eventually you become an investigator if you really focus on it, right? But in this world, we don't really have that kind of experience or training of, or this is how you think, this is how you handle this evidence. So that's what this book, I think the whole premise of it is, here are the things, the tips of how to think when you're doing these technical investigations. Because it's one thing to be technical. I say technical is easy because you can learn to do forensics on YouTube. If you're going to learn a lot of wrong things, you're going to learn a lot of old things. But if you know where to look, you can learn. You could pay and have someone teach you this is the current right way to do it, right? So you can do that, but the investigation part is difficult because how do you get that experience of, well, I'm going to go and investigate something. I can't, right? Because how do I do that? And if I have an image, how do I know human behavior? So there's not much training. And I know we talked about vendors before, push button tools, and there's been complaints about, well, vendors need to teach forensics. They need to teach these things, and I disagree because if I'm going to take a class in X-ways, I'm going to spend $3,000-4,000 on the tuition and $1,000 for travel and all the other things. And if they spend a day or two on, well, let's talk about human behavior. Let's talk about psychology. Let's talk about you. I'm going to say, look, I just need to know where's the button at? Where's that right click going to take me where? So I think the vendors have to teach their tools because we're paying them to teach our tools. But we're missing that other part. And with the college education, they don't typically teach that either. You may have a critical thinking class as an elective, or maybe some critical thinking within a class. And critical thinking is just one aspect of an investigative mind. It's that's just one thing to look at. It's like an umbrella, and there's got that. You got a bunch of other things in there, biases to deal with, and so I think that's what this book came about. And I wrote it. 200 something pages, and it took a while to condense this topic into something that's easy to read. So my point was, you can read it in the weekend. You can go through it, and if you've been doing this work for a long time, you can say, you know what, I'm validated in a lot of the things that I've been doing. I feel better, more confident, and I learned a couple things. And the other side of the coin could be, wow, this is the way that I should be considering to think. I didn't know I had these biases. I do, because we all have biases, and now I know how to mitigate it.
Yeah.
I know how, I'm not a detective, but I can see how that works. So I try to make it into a readable, entertaining kind of thing, but also important, I guess, a useful book, I guess.
Yeah. Because I'm still reading this book, I'm still early, less than halfway, and it definitely, you could breeze through this in a weekend for sure. What I find myself doing is actually read a chapter, and then I am sitting in my office lost in thought, thinking about what the chapter was, and then I go, wait, I read something in that chapter, and then I go back and I can't remember where it is. So I'm rereading this is the first book that I've done that. Normally I'll
Brett,
when I think about
I want this noted on the record, Brett. You've made Desi think.
Oh, it's and I love, because I really love, I'm very passionate about education. I've worked at a education company before for gamified cyber learning. I think that's fantastic. I think that's how a lot of people should learn. But then there still is, like you said, the gap between how do you teach someone to investigate when it's outside of the cases that you're teaching is, I think, the key point. I can teach someone to do a image and a case and go, this is this case. But then it's still a very large leap to then let them do their own case on something completely different and then go, okay, I need to not only apply all the technical skills that I learned and learn new technical skills if there's new data I come across, but then also think to investigate that whole case by themselves. And I was very fortunate coming up that I had really good mentors, and I feel like that seems to be the key way for a lot of people to get into this field, which is probably why it's not entry level, because you need the aptitude to learn off people when there's so much uncertainty in getting this skill.
Yeah, I'm going to say I've been very fortunate in the same as you, as I've had excellent mentors, and one of the universities that I work with, and Desi, you've spoken to her as well, Professor Sarah Morris, has worked very, very hard on putting together training scenarios which are reflective of the real world in terms of investigation. If not, obviously none of us wants to do CSAM cases as part of our training. But we've got so we've created this sort of training scenario set in a fictional world that has its fictional criminals and its fictional things in order to do that. And recently she ran a crime scene simulation where they had to go in and actually look for stuff. And astonishingly, some of the students didn't get it. They didn't understand that this is about investigation. They just wanted the hard technical stuff. They didn't see the point of all of this, and it's such an all-encompassing field that we need to be looking at what the requirements are in order not only to prove a case but to make a point, but to investigate, to find out, look for additional links, lift the keyboard up and see if the post-it note is there with the goddamn password on it. Because we've all spent, I'm going to say I remember this years ago. It was like I got a device sent to me, and I was like, do we know what the password is? And they were like, no, we haven't got a clue. Open the devices 1 2 3 4, and it's like, yeah, okay, fine. Let me in straight away. But the point is that if you have no concepts about things like, what are the most popular passwords, what are the likely human things, you can't start to do any of the technical stuff if you can't get into the damn device or haven't found it in the first place. So yeah, it really is a hugely important aspect to build this mindset. And it's funny because I came from originally a computer science background, and I studied artificial intelligence as well, which perhaps is my redeeming feature, because I had to wonder a lot about how things think. But you don't ask these questions in computer science. You look at algorithms, you look at data, you look at normalization of databases, you look at programming languages and whether you can put them down into BNF form and all sorts of stuff like this, but you don't actually look at people. And we forget, and I'm going to say, we forget that this is what this is about. We're not looking at computers, we're looking at what people do with computers, whether it's IR or DF. It does come down to that.
I think that one of the, I think the concept, I think that if I tell one person one thing to do this job better, is to look at the computer and the data as if a person did it, right? Every action, a person did it. Even if it's malware, someone wrote it to do something. So everything goes back to a person. Technically, we look at things like the end point is the machine. That is our end stop. We're going all the way to the wall of the drive. This is the end of the drive. This is the end of our case. But it's not. It's somebody touched it for a reason, and they touch it somehow. And I think we're investigating a person. We're not investigating a computer. We're not investigating a smartphone. A person touched this. A person handled it. The person used it to commit a crime, whatever it may be. And I think if you have that perspective and that mindset of I'm looking to track a person down, even on the IR side, I think especially because you'll never find those people usually because it's somewhere else. Yep. But to have that perspective, I think makes a big difference. And I brought that back from like doing undercover work, buying drugs. And let's say, cocaine, for example. When I looked at cocaine, my thought process is, well, I know the whole manufacturing process, the smuggling process. I know how people use it. I know how much money they're making from it. I mean, all these things about it. So whenever I would, see some cocaine or buy some cocaine, in my mind is I know the people who were stepping on the leaves, the kerosene, all these things. I know how it got there. And that's how I would approach all my cases of knowing more than just, well, I have some powder in my hand. It's more than that. A computer's the same. It's more than a smartphone. This thing was used to victimize, a dozen people. This computer was used to victimize 1,000 people. So who did that, or what group did that? And thinking like that, then I think you can start to crack that wall of technical expertise by saying, well, I'm just going to use these tools to get to that person, right? Instead of I'm having fun using these tools. Oh, look what I found. I found this deleted file. This is great. It's like, well, that's great, but what sense does it make? And I know on the law enforcement side, one of the differences compared to let's say a computer science graduate who doesn't have any experience, right? On the law enforcement side, it's more like what evidence do I need to prove this case, right? I got 10 terabytes of data. Do I need 10 terabytes of data? No, I need the evidence within that 10 terabytes of data to prove that somebody did it, someone legitimately did it. Whereas on the computer science side is, I want to learn everything. I'm going to break apart everything I can, and I'm going to have a 500-page report, and look how good I am. And yes, it is 100% technically accurate, better than what the law enforcement guy could do, right? Because it's like, hey, the report's this thick compared to this thick. But what is more important for the case? IR is the same. You can go through the whole network, and you can map it all out and say, this is what we got, and I got all this stuff. But the answer that the C-level employee, executive level is, wait a minute, is it fixed or not? I just is it fixed?
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of the time, because like most organizations will just wipe their network when the investigation's done and restart. But it's that risk versus reward of, if we spend more time investigating,
Right.
what are we going to get out of it? And if your answer is not much, then it's like, okay, investigation's ending, we're resetting the network,
Right.
and then we're going from there. So it's always that balance, and yeah, it sounds the same in DF.
Well, the interesting thing in DF is actually we got to remember who our end client is, and
Yeah.
it's not actually somebody who has the foggiest idea what you're talking about. The end client is a jury and a judge, and I'm not going to be rude about judges because I'm going to have to stand up in front of some of them, but juries definitely don't know what you're talking about. And you know, you're going to be presenting incredibly complex technical ideals and ideas, and if you've got a 500-page report that details everything, that you've lost them from the outset. You need to be succinct and to the point, and about the things that are critical in there.
Yeah.
And that's the other major point is I don't think we teach enough to convey information, you know, that people can understand it, because it's kind of ego, I think, is a thing where I'm smarter than everybody else in this room and I'm going to prove it. You know, where if you're really smarter than everybody else in the room, then you want to make everybody else just as smart, right? So they can understand. And I'll give you an example. I was in a federal court, and the crux was on backup tapes, right? And you know, I'm not an expert on backup tapes, but you know, I know what a backup tape is, and that's how they work and sort of thing. And so I go on my stand and I give my spiel on my perspective on the backup tapes in this case, and then the opposing expert goes up and she gives her spiel, and it's really technical. And I'm taking notes because, oh man, she's killing me. I mean, she really knows. She knows backup tape very well. And I'm going, okay, I'm going to be called on this one, I'm sure. And the judge had stopped her midway and said, and asked her a question. And she gave this long, convoluted answer. And he asked her again, and he asked her a third time, and she kept giving these long. And he turns to me in the back of the courtroom, and he said, can you explain to me what she's saying? And I said, I think she's saying this. And I asked her, is that right? She goes, yes. And the judge goes, okay, now I got it. And I thought, okay, this is a good day. And I just... So the technical part is important. But like I said, if you can't help the end client, and I think the end client goes all the way back to the victim, whether it be the business, or it could be a falsely accused, or who knows, that even the defendant could be a victim if it's a false accusation, that sort of thing. So we just have to, we don't have to explain to the victim. We got to explain to, like I said, to the court, right, or to our C level and different things. So some IR should be a criminal investigation, because if it's going to bankrupt the company, regardless of what you do, well, you might as well go all the way and get some justice out of it. So conveyance is I think, a big deal that we miss.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, in the technical scenario, one of the things that isn't taught particularly well, generally speaking, is report writing. You know, they're told the technical details, but not how to construct that into a sentence that actually makes sense. So definitely one to watch.
I'm not sure whether it's structured the same way in DF for you guys, but I find like when I came in kind of the entry-level job, it was very much like the focus on the technical and getting all the information and then putting that technical information into a report. But then it's not until you hit like the principal level, which is like 3-4 levels above the entry level, that they then start to teach the skills to go, okay, now as a principal, you need to convey that to C-suite who have no idea what you're talking about. And it's like, why is it that you wait like those 5-6 years until you hit that level that you're kind of like starting to do that? Like they don't, and it's a like there was no education pathway when I was doing it, but even I think technical training now, like we're saying, it's starkly missing on how to write a concise report in DFIR.
I think part of that is a lack of peer review in the private world, private sector, especially in the police world. You know, the patrol officer writes a report. It goes to a sergeant who approves it or sends it back, and then it goes up the chain into a computer, and eventually goes to if it goes to trial, a prosecutor is going to read it, the defense attorney is going to read it, the jury is going to hear it. All those things happen, and after a police officer goes through once of those, if it goes to trial, and then their report's being read and tore apart, that's probably the biggest lesson is how to write a report after you're getting smashed on the stand of well, I'll never write that way again, and you learn that way.
Yeah.
On the private world, it's
Yeah.
you write a report and people, I've seen it, people will read it, and I know, and they're looking at it saying it's not really that good, but I don't care, it's not my report. Yeah, and they'll send it off, and there's no feedback. And I think if we have more feedback or some, and I think I wrote in his book as well, is some peer review is always a good thing. Show it to your buddy.
Yeah.
And like on the book that
Yeah.
I'm writing now, it's just a completely different book as far as how it's written. But I asked my tech editors and beta readers to kill it. I mean, if it doesn't sound right, doesn't read right, if it's too difficult, it's worthless material. So beat it up. You won't hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
It's I'll cry in the corner later, but
I think I've shared this story before, and like talking about peer review, and I think I've shared this to you, Si, as well. But I had a very good mentor in my first job. She was an amazing boss, and is now heads up like one of the biggest cyber teams in Australia. But I wrote this report, and instead of giving me any initial feedback, she sent me a meme back, and it was the 1970s film of Godzilla, where it was like the prop set was Godzilla in a cart on its side. And then the caption on the meme was like, "Your report was so bad that you gave Godzilla a stroke." And that was my initial feedback for my first ever professional report. And I was just like, "What is this?" And she was just like, "We're having a meeting to discuss your report writing." But it was good. Like, honestly, my reports got much, much better after that. But it was very astute feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife is a project manager, and she deals with comms a lot, dealing with from the people at the bottom to the people at the top. And if I ever give her anything of mine to read, it comes back with comments like, "Why isn't there a full stop for like 3 paragraphs? Why do you not understand punctuation?" And I'm like, it's been proven that the longer a sentence is, the more intelligent the person writing it. She's no, it doesn't work. It's too long. Put some fucking punctuation in.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, my first private sector report was it was a IP theft, and the attorney is in New York, and I'm on the West Coast, and the attorney's on the East Coast. And I did a police report basically on this forensic exam, and I emailed it off, and the attorney called me maybe 10 minutes after I emailed it, and he's dropping a lot of F-bombs, and it all come down to, did my guy do it or not? And I said, yes. He goes, just write that. And I learned, well, I guess that's what they want, is did they do it?
Yeah.
The technical goes in the back, just give the answer up front.
Yeah. So I think like we're kind of coming up to the hour now, but what is kind of your feedback for people? Like you said, you get the question all the time about how do I get into DFIR, and my recommendation is, like, I think some technical training, like your book, I recommend a lot to people even in the space that have been in a while. But what is kind of the answer that you give to the people that reach out to you quite a lot?
You must be technical. You have to be technically proficient. You have to be able to do the actual technical work. I mean, it's and I not to rely on not to bash a vendor training for tool training. You have to have tool training, but you have to have exact training on this is what the registry is. This is how you pull that. You have to have that information first.
The basics.
You got to have the basics. You got to have the fundamentals, and a lot of people want to skip that. There's a lot of cert hunters where I'm just going to get this cert. I'm not going to even take notes in the class. I'm just going to pass. I mean, there's so many classes you can take. You'll get the cert because you showed up. And that doesn't prove you learned anything. And you put it on a resume, and it makes hiring bad because now you're hiring someone who doesn't really know, but they got the cert. So technically proficient is probably the number one thing. And then second is this part, the how do I work a case? And I know IR doesn't really look at it like casework. Hey, we have an incident. It's actually a case. I mean, the process is the same. Okay, here is our problem, right? What is our objective to solve this problem? What tools do we use to solve this problem, and how we wrap it up? So we have to have that mindset of how do I work a case, right? And with the people, there's someone did it, a group did it, a person did it, whoever, accidentally or on purpose. You have to have that secondarily, but you have to have it. And I think they're both important because you can hire a technically proficient person but it's not going to do the job, right? It's like, oh, we keep getting these reports of data. Now we got to look at what you did and figure out what it means. You want to have people who can do both, and I think you have to do both. And I don't believe one is you can be stronger in one than the other, obviously. But if you can solve the problem, if you can have a law enforcement person who doesn't have a computer science degree, but they can solve all these cases at a less technical level, but they solve them quicker, faster, cheaper, more accurate, then that's great. You can have a technical person who doesn't have the law enforcement experience, but if they can jump in because they know where the data lives, I mean, they live and breathe it. Like this, almost like born into a computer almost, and they can quickly get it that way. If you have those two, that's all you need. It's just that don't skip these things. If you think, I've talked to a lot of people who, I know enough how to investigate a case. Well, for me, there's not any really investigative training for thinking. I've taken a lot of investigative training by title, like homicide training, homicide investigator, narcotics investigator, and almost all of them are checklists. Like I took a blood spatter class, right? And it's well, here's the ruler, and here's this, and lasers, and here's what it means. And I equate that to a tool vendor training where it says, well, if you see A pop up, you click B, and then you'll get your answer C. That's good technically, but what if it's Z? Where's my answer to that? We have to teach, well, if you don't see that, well, you're going to have to use a strategy of thinking rather than some tactical skill. So to get into it, I think you really have to have both. Start with the technical, because if you can't pull a registry, it doesn't matter how good you can investigate, right? So, but if you can pull a registry, you still have to know how to investigate. So don't skip it. You gotta have it, and don't expect to be given. I can't imagine an organization hiring somebody new and handle an IR incident that could bankrupt the company or lose millions of dollars. It's like, that's not going to happen. Same with the criminal defense case. You got a guy facing murder for maybe he's innocent, and you give it to somebody who doesn't know technically. Hey, guy might be convicted. So you have to have both. So
I mean, I still worry even when I get cases now. I've got 10 years experience, and I'm like, do I know enough to do this? Is it like that? So I totally get that, and it's the appropriate leveling of resource. But I think you said something very interesting, which is actually collaboration is a huge tool that we don't leverage enough. Which is that if you are in a position to be able to leverage an investigator and a technical expert and stick them together in a way that makes them work, I think I think that's it, and I think that's one of the great things about DF actually is the fantastically friendly and compliant community that we have, that people will step up and go, actually, you know what, I've seen this. If you ask a question, people will say, I've seen this before, this is where you need to go. I think there's some really really good things that can be taken away from that.
And you touched on there as being the fundamentals of kind of like the technical side, like of knowing a registry and stuff. And then on the investigative side, and that's a really interesting point, because when I think about IR does case management, I think, in general, very poorly. And that would be a fundamental skill of that. Like, could you think of other than like setting up an appropriate case management system of like how you store the data and how you like when I think back to my IR days, like the amount of times that we weren't probably storing the evidence just in case, because I think some of those could have turned criminal, and they would have come back and been like, hey, like, can we get a more detailed report on this? And we didn't have images or that kind of thing. Like, what other kind of fundamentals can you see on that side of the house that, like, IR and DF, like, I think DF probably has it down pat, but like, what are those that IR could think about?
Counts on it, mate.
I don't know, so I just think you guys are like got it sorted, but maybe not.
One of my frustrations with IR work is here's a big difference with IR and DF is in digital forensics, you get what you get, right? It's like, here is the evidence. It is what it is. Maybe it's corrupted. Maybe it's all these different things, right? You get what you get. With the IR world, before something happens, you can set up everything to collect whatever evidence you want. It's like we're gonna set this up, and if something happens, we know where the evidence is going to be. We got these logs set up the way we have all these things set up. So then it becomes a forensic example. Well, now we have perfect evidence because we designed the capture of the evidence of what we want. The DF guys, it's like a criminal case. It's like, well, this is the computer that was in the back of the trunk of a car, and that's what we got. And the IR side is, well, this is our system, and we set up everything, and we can capture what we want. We can ignore what we want. So if you're looking at it like, well, just in case something is going to be criminal, we might want to prepare a little bit, right? So that makes DF guys really happy if they're coming in after the fact of an IR that becomes a case, a criminal case or civil litigation, where the DF comes in and they go, wow, this is nice. You guys have everything, preserved, set up as if from the start you were prepared for this. And it's like, well, we weren't really prepared. We were prepared for it. We're hoping it didn't happen, but we got it. But I've walked in where drives are being wiped on a legal case, and the IT guys were saying they're doing me a favor by cleaning everything. I'm going, no, that's not a favor. Right? So I think having the being able to set up the evidence trap, I guess, that's what I would call it, a trap to catch evidence. I think is the neat thing in IR.
I think there's one stage more than that IR has over us, which is the opportunity for continual improvement. Because I'm going to say I've worked in security. Stuff happens all the time. Okay, you got hacked today. That's great. You'll deal with it. You're going to get hacked tomorrow. It's maybe 1 week, it may be 3 weeks, it may be 3 months, but it's going to happen again. You know that. You've got lessons learned from that you can take back and you can apply. We're not going to get the same murder twice. Yep. It just doesn't happen. So you can't go back and apply continual improvement and say, next time, what I really want you to do is capture this. Right. So yeah.
I love how you guys have this perfect image of IR and I had this perfect image of DF because and I think maybe this is a lesson that people can take away, because I've walked into cases where you've got this like 1,000+ endpoint network and you're trying to track this adversary through the network, and they're like, don't worry, we collect all of our network logs and it's everything there. But then you realize they've got, I won't name the vendor, but and probably all vendors do this anyway, but they've got a particular edge device that is collecting all these logs, but all it does is it collects the external IP and then it maps the external IP to an internal IP and then puts that to the endpoint. But there's no translation log because it's not turned on by default. So then you're like, okay, all of the logs are now useless because I don't know which end IP maps to the internal IP because I have no logs for the translation. And I guess that's the lesson learned. And the lesson learned is, if you want to set all that stuff up, probably run through a scenario of someone breaking into your network and going, hey, can I actually track this through the network? So, but it is funny that we all have ideas that we've solved all our problems on the other side of the fence.
But the moral of the story actually is that wargaming is good.
Yeah.
Running through a test scenario which you've set up will start to highlight some of the areas where your procedures are weak. Yeah. Not all of them. You will learn the particular areas that are weak the first time it's used in anger. But genuinely, yeah, wargaming trial runs, practice runs, very, very important. Yeah. Well, I think we have come to the top of the hour now. And I just want to say again, Brett, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Yeah. And again, huge fan. I have your books, and I will continue to get your books because they are such good, good quality and good value. And and I recommend them, as Desi does apparently. Yeah. Which is fantastic news. Just to say to all of those who are listening today, thank you very much for listening to the Forensic Focus podcast. We really appreciate your custom loyalty. I don't know, pick a word, but coming and listening to us anyway, because we thoroughly enjoy doing it. We get to talk to people who we like and have the opportunity to learn. And we hope that you pick up some things from this too. You can find the podcasts available on all good places that you can find podcasts, of which a list, if you've ever listened to the podcast before, you will know I cannot remember or recall in any way, shape or form, but probably includes Spotify, iTunes and other sources of stuff. We do have a YouTube channel.
you can actually get the list I saw from our website. So if you check out
Can
our
you?
website,
Oh,
yeah,
right,
I'm
go
pretty
to
sure
the
the list
website.
is there. So you can
There you go,
link out
perfect.
to everything from there.
Brett's books are available from all good booksellers, Amazon and etc. They are available in Kindle, I believe, if you do not wish to buy a paper copy. Is that correct? Or am I talking out of
Except for
line?
this one. Yeah.
Except for this one, which is
Yeah.
fair enough. But I would thoroughly recommend the paper copies. They are very high quality print and are definitely pocketable and carryable to a location of your choice to read on the beach, in the car, in the pub, whatever your preference is. Brett, thank you so much. Desi, a pleasure as always. And we will call this recording a recording. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.